Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see you again on the virtual world. I hope you had a nice weekend and that you and your families continue to remain safe out there. So, lots going on here. Congratulations on making it to your final week of classes, right? We're very close to the end, so let that carry you through to the end. Stay focused and finish the semester strong. Okay. So if you haven't done so already, please be sure that you do take your second lab exam today on class marker. So please complete that. And if you have any technical problems during the exam, by all means, please send me an email so that I can help you with that. Okay. Additionally, we have our final exam schedule. As you know, your final exam is a week from this Wednesday. So your final exam is Wednesday, May 13th. So truly, folks, we are approaching the end, and I know everyone could enjoy a little bit of rest at this time. So before we continue with anything new, do you have any questions? If you can hear me okay, please type yes into the chat window. Okay, great. At least I know that you are hearing me. Okay, so I hope you're well. Please let me know if you do have questions, okay? Speak up, type questions into the chat window. If you feel so motivated, send me an email if you have a question about something. Okay, so let's get back into let's get our thinking caps turned back on. We're going to go back to the Microsoft Word document. We're going to finish chapter 15 in hopefully 10 minutes or so and move on to chapter 16. Okay, let's do that. Okay, so we have the chat window up and we have the Microsoft Word document up. Okay, so last time we were taking this tour through the digestive system where we spent an hour talking about all the activities that happen, starting with putting food into the mouth, chewing it up, pulverizing up with your teeth, allowing it to mix with saliva to become bolus, swallowing the bolus into the pharynx, which then, because the larynx is closed, gets diverted into the esophagus. From the esophagus, the smooth muscle tissue squeezes through peristalsis and pushes that content down into the stomach. The stomach turns that material over through a process called liquefaction and then ejects the material, which is now called chyme because it was mixed with the hydrochloric acid of the stomach juices into the small intestine. Okay, so we spent an hour talking about that sequence of events last time. So I'm going to pick up with our notes here with the small intestine, right? We now have the food that we have consumed, which is not technically food anymore. It's chyme, C-H-Y-M-E, and it's in the small intestine. And remember, the small intestine is the site of chemical digestion and nutrient absorption from your food. This is where most of the chemical digestion and nutrient absorption occurs. Okay, now bullet point letter B. Remember, the chemical digestion is only possible because of enzymes that are made in the pancreas. Okay, so the pancreas is extremely important to the digestive process. Okay, just a couple more notes about the small intestine. Do you have any questions right now? Okay, please let me know if I can help you with something. All right, so one thing I wanted to mention to you is that fatty material, fats, triglycerides, things like that are very difficult to digest. And so there is an additional substance that works in the small intestine to help break up fat droplets, help help to break up large fat droplets and make them much smaller. Does anybody know what that substance is called? Let me type that question into the chat window. What substance works in your small intestine to break up large fat droplets? Anyone know what that is? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Silver. Absolutely. It is bile. That's fantastic. Okay, so fatty substances are very difficult to digest. Okay, so for this reason, the liver manufactures a special substance called bile. Okay, bile is made in the liver, and then it is transported to the gallbladder for storage. Bile is stored. Okay, notice the language I'm using here, right? I'm telling you the liver manufactures the bile, but bile is stored in the gallbladder. And when necessary, bile is deposited into the small intestine from the gallbladder to support fat digestion. Okay. So bile, the fancy word that chemists use when they talk about the properties of bile and how it does what it does, they describe bile as an emulsifying agent. Bile is an emulsifier. That's a fancy way of saying it's a substance that kind of acts like dish detergent to take big fat droplets and break them apart into smaller fat droplets, okay? And when you do that, when you take a large droplet of fat and you break it into smaller droplets of fat, what you do is increase the available surface area for the enzymes that can typically break down the fat. You give them more area to work on, which allows you to break down the fat more rapidly and efficiently. Okay, so bile is an emulsifier, which means it has the ability to act like dish detergent to break large fat droplets into smaller fat droplets to assist digestion. Okay? All right. So if we think about it at this point, you know, we've been talking about number 5, the small intestine. But the small intestine could not have done its job without the enzymes from the pancreas, and the small intestine could not have done its job without bile, which was initially manufactured in the liver, stored in the gallbladder, and then eventually deposited into the small intestine, right? So the small intestine is the primary site of chemical digestion and nutrient absorption, but it doesn't do all that work by itself. It gets a lot of assistance from the pancreas and from the liver. Do you have any questions at this time? Okay. All right. So let's continue our journey here. Now, after step 5, which is the small intestine, there's 2 possible things that can occur. We can have material that the body is not interested in any way. The material that the body's has not broken down and it does not want to absorb into the bloodstream. We could have that material move into the large intestine, form what we think of as fecal material, poop, and then eventually you get rid of it, you know, you poop it out of the body. Or material that is digested and is absorbed into the bloodstream can be transported throughout the body. So after number 5, we come to a fork in the road. Okay, so number 5 is going to be either 6A, which is the large intestine, or 6B, nutrients enter the bloodstream for delivery to the, can anybody fill in that blank? Whatever nutrients enter the bloodstream at the small intestine, what is the first organ that those nutrients will go to? You know? Okay, I'll type this into the chat window. When nutrients enter the bloodstream at the small intestine, what organ do they go to first? Anybody? Okay, let me help you here. I'd like you to figure this out. The answer, you can discover the answer for yourself from looking at the information and pictures on page 295 of your textbook. So what organ receives the nutrients in the bloodstream from the small intestine? Where does that material go? When you absorb sugar from a piece of candy in the small intestine, and that sugar enters the bloodstream, what organ does that sugar go to first? What do you think, folks? Puzzle it out, page 295. Thank you, Abigail. You are correct. It is not the kidneys. It's not the stomach. What do we have left? Okay. All right, folks. Okay. Yes, it is the liver. Okay. If you look at figure 1511, okay, look at number, okay, 1511, look at red ball number 2. It says digested food molecules then travel through the hepatic portal veins to the liver. Okay, if you look carefully at the small intestine, notice that there's a bunch of capillary beds there off the small intestine. So nutrients get absorbed across the intestinal wall, across the wall of the capillary bed and into the bloodstream. And from there, that blood continues its journey up that small tube that goes up to the bottom of your liver, which is known as the hepatic portal vein. Okay, so that's where that material goes. So we'll fill this in here. Okay. Either 6A, the large intestine, or 6B, nutrients enter the bloodstream for delivery to the liver. Okay. So this is where we need to finish our conversation together, and I need to pick up the pace because we really do need to get to the next chapter. So either 6A or 6B will occur next. Okay. All right, for 6A, which is going to be the large intestine, for food material that the body is not interested in, this material will leave the small intestine and enter the large intestine. Okay, so we are in the large intestine at this point. And there's lots of things we could say, and there's lots of jokes we could make about poop and stuff like that. but I'm just going to give you a couple quick ideas about what the large intestine actually does. Okay. Okay. The large intestine is large because of its diameter, not because of its length. All right. And the primary functions of the large intestine include, okay, the large intestine will absorb a lot of the water that's in the material that was just put into the large intestine. So all this watery goo that comes out of the small intestine, it will be deposited into the large intestine. And it will stay there for a period of time, usually long enough so a lot of the water will be pulled out of what we think of as poop to adjust the consistency of the fecal matter, so that when we do have a bowel movement and release it from the body, it's not going to be overly liquidy. It's not going to be like you might experience when you have diarrhea. Okay? So one of the functions of the large intestine is to adjust the water content of the material. Okay? Normally, this means absorbing extra water so that waste material is not overly liquidy. Okay? So if there's too much liquid in the large intestine, the body will absorb it and sort of dry out the fecal matter, dry it a little bit so that we can release it from the body. However, if we have a situation where you are constipated and the material in the large intestine is too dry, then in fact you'll have more water leave the bloodstream and enter the material in the large intestine to break it down and soften it up so it's not so hard for you to pass it. Okay? So one of the functions of the large intestine is to adjust the water content of the material. Okay, and what I mean by material is the poop. Okay, another function of the large intestine obviously is to temporarily store the fecal matter, right? We don't go around pooping every moment of the day, right? We can go around and do other things that are important. So it's the job of the large intestine to temporarily store the fecal material. Okay. And then finally, in concert with the smooth muscle tissue that's around the large intestine, primary function of the large intestine is, upon hopefully a moment of our own choosing, to eliminate or remove the fecal material from the body. Okay. I will note here that in your large intestine, we have a variety of microorganisms, a variety of bacteria that live their lives out in our large intestine. The most notable of those is E. coli. So the large intestine has billions and billions of E. coli bacteria. And the purpose of these bacteria is to manufacture some nutrients for our own body that our own cells cannot manufacture. And what I'm talking about is some of our vitamins. Some of the vitamins that our body needs to live and thrive are actually manufactured by bacteria that live in the large intestine. So another function of the large intestine is to provide a home for bacteria like E. coli, which manufacture some vitamins for us. Okay, specifically vitamin K. Vitamin K is made by E. coli in our large intestine, and so are some of the different versions of vitamin D. Vitamin B as in boy. Okay, vitamin K and some versions of vitamin B are made by these bacteria. And so all of this is working in concert to help keep us healthy. Okay, folks, do you have any questions about the large intestine? Okay, I wish I had a little bit more time to talk to you about some weird things that can happen with the large intestine. You know, if you are an American, you've lived your life in America, and if you eat an American diet, then there's probably a good chance when you're in your 50s or 60s that you're going to develop a condition called diverticulitis, which is inflammation of pockets that form in the large intestine, associated with Western diets, like diets that people eat in the United States. I don't have time to talk about it, folks, but please note your textbook does talk about it on figure 1514 on page 298. So you probably have already read through that as you've been studying on your own time. Okay, any questions right now? Okay, so remember, for 6, it can be either 6A or 6B. So if the material of the body is absorbed into the bloodstream, then that material is going to be delivered to the liver. Okay, so 6A or 6B, if food is absorbed into the bloodstream, okay, and by food I'm using that very liberally. I'm talking about the nutrients that have been released by breaking down the food by chemical digestion. If the nutrients are absorbed into the bloodstream, they are first delivered to the liver. Okay. So, you know, the liver itself is a very complicated organ, and I'm only going to tell you a couple things about it at this time. Okay. Functions of the liver. Well, first I'll mention to you that the liver is known to perform over 500 different functions in the body. It is an extraordinarily sophisticated and complicated organ, perhaps only less in sophistication as compared to your brain. I mean, it does a lot of things for us. Okay, it is known to carry out over 500 distinct functions, of which we're not even going to touch the surface of with our notes here. But I will say that one of the primary functions of the liver, right, the nutrients that enter the bloodstream from your small intestine. This is the first moment in our journey of the digestive system that the food you put into your mouth ultimately gets access to your bloodstream. That's both good and dangerous. Because if we allow something into the bloodstream that should not be there, then when your heart contracts and circulates that blood, it's going to circulate those potentially dangerous molecules to every location of your body, from your brain down to your big toe. So the point I want to make here is that one of the primary functions of the liver is to act as a security checkpoint to evaluate the nutrients and ensure that they are safe to be released into the body. Okay, so obviously if the nutrient is safe, the liver is just going to let it pass right through the security checkpoint. If the nutrient is safe, it is allowed to enter the rest of the body. If the nutrient is judged by the liver to not be safe, to be potentially hazardous, to be toxic, to be a poison, then what will happen is that the cells of the liver will manufacture enzymes to try to biochemically alter that material and change it into a form that is safer, okay? If the nutrient is unsafe. So let me give you an example here, okay? If the nutrient is safe, like a vitamin, okay? Then that vitamin, the nutrients, are allowed to enter the body. If the nutrient is unsafe, like alcohol, okay? Alcohol is not really a good thing for us from Mother Nature's perspective. And of course, you know, if we drink enough alcohol, we will become inebriated, we will become drunk, and that's from the alcohol circulating through the body. Okay, but the reality of it is, when you drink alcohol, you do not stay drunk, right? There's a period of time that you might feel tipsy, but give your body enough time and you will not be inebriated anymore. The reason for that is because the liver is busy manufacturing enzymes to chemically modify the alcohol and to detoxify it from your system. Liver enzymes work hard to chemically alter and detoxify the unsafe material. Okay? It's the same way if, let's say you had a headache and maybe you take an aspirin to relieve your headache symptoms. Well, that aspirin is going to work for a couple hours probably, but then you might very well have the headache return on you. And that's because the liver has been detoxifying the aspirin. It has been chemically altering it so that the aspirin can't do its job anymore. That's what the liver does. So the liver acts as a security checkpoint to protect us. Okay, questions? One last thing I'd like to mention about the liver, well, two things, is you already know it produces bile, which is important for fat digestion in the small intestine. And I think you already know this because of a previous conversation we've had, but remember, the liver is one of the primary locations that actually stores excess blood sugar. So the liver is heavily involved in storing excess glucose, keeping it out of the bloodstream when it's not needed. Okay? It will store excess blood glucose as glycogen. Okay? All right, gang. I think I better let it rest right now because I've taken up a half an hour of our time together and do have to do some other things. So do you have any questions right now you'd like to ask about your digestive system? Okay. Was there a question?
Yeah, but I'm thinking about the part that I'm about to ask. When the ending of the intestine that gets cut in a surgery, it's usually because it gets inflamed. I was gonna ask what causes that, but I'm looking here. I'm trying to find.
Do you have a page number?
Well, on the page here, I know. It's fine. When it comes, I'll ask.
Okay. Feel free, Terry, to.
Oh, the appendix.
Oh, the appendix.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. If the appendix gets inflamed, A lot of times it is surgically removed from the body. For a very, very long time, we really could not figure out what the purpose or function of the appendix is. And so we figured we could just remove it and everything would be okay. And honestly, we can remove the appendix and people can live a pretty normal life without it. But it is clear to us now that the appendix is the home of beneficial bacteria that live in the body. So, um, you know, if you are on an antibiotic to cure strep throat or something, that antibiotic will often damage some of the good bacteria in your body. And so it is the role of the appendix to repopulate the body with the good beneficial bacteria after it's been harmed by treatment with antibiotic or some other toxic chemicals that you may encounter. So it's not completely without impact when we remove the appendix, because the appendix does help keep the microbes in our body balanced.
Mm. So does it have to be replaced when it's removed, or it doesn't matter?
The appendix itself cannot be replaced. We don't have the technology to do that. I mean, I guess theoretically you could try an appendix transplant, but that really isn't done.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else? Okay, gang. So, long story short, right? Be kind to your body. Don't abuse it, because it's very, very hard to get replacement body parts. Okay. Let's continue here. Folks, I am going to start chapter 16 at this point, okay, which is the urinary system. And boy, we're buzzing along here, and I'm sorry that we don't have more time. But we can do this. Okay, we can make it work. Okay, so you know that the urinary system is responsible for forming your pee, your urine. Okay, but there's something that's even more important that you appreciate. Okay, and since we're a little bit low on time, I'm just going to give it to you. Okay, the primary function of your urinary system is to regulate the volume, pressure, and composition of your blood. Okay? Read that and think about it to yourself. The primary function of your urinary system is to regulate the volume of your blood, the pressure of your blood pressure, and the chemical composition of your blood. What is in your blood? What is not in your blood? That's the role of the urinary system. The fact that the urinary system manufactures pee is simply a side effect of regulating the volume, pressure, and composition of your blood. The fact that urine is made is really a side effect of regulating the volume, pressure, and composition of your blood. Okay. So forming urine is a complicated process, but a vital process in keeping us healthy. Because if your kidneys don't function properly, then all kinds of toxic materials build up in your bloodstream. And those toxic materials kind of make the rest of your body, including your brain and central nervous system, not work so well. And it's not a good thing. Okay, so I thought at this point, that I would show you a video. I mean, it's not super critical that you see this video, but I think you'll like this video. Now, we haven't had time to talk too much in our course about, what some of our modern technology can do for us. But if you're really curious about things, you should Google a phrase called tissue engineering. And I'll let you do that after class, but the whole idea with tissue engineering is to provide replacement body parts for ourselves in the future. The idea that 50 years from now, if you have a kidney fail, that we can actually grow a brand new kidney in the lab for you and put it in your body. 50 years from now, if you have your liver fail, we can keep you alive long enough to grow a new liver in the lab and put it back into your body, and you can live a relatively normal, healthy life. This is the goal of tissue engineering. So I just wanted to show you a little video that talks about this. Okay, so bear with me, folks. I'm going to show you a quick little video here about manufacturing, about growing a kidney. Here we go. All right. So this video is actually from 2013, so it's already 7 years old. And just watch this, and it's kind of a marvel what has already been accomplished. Here we go.
If Dr. Frankenstein were real and alive today, he'd probably want to stop by the Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston. Here, scientists are harvesting dead organs and returning them to life. But instead of giant green monsters, these researchers are creating hearts, lungs, limbs, and kidneys that could one day be used to replace failing organs in people. Reporting in Nature Medicine, Harold Ott and his team describe their vision of the future and how they created a functional, transplantable kidney in rats.
What we try to do here is to regenerate organs for transplantation, organs for patients with end-stage organ failure.
Using donor organs that would not normally be suitable for transplantation, Ott's team reanimates them by first washing away native cells with a soapy solution. What's left behind is a natural scaffold of structural proteins that can be repopulated with stem cells taken from a patient.
What's fascinating is that you're able to, with that process, preserve the blueprint of the organ, but it's completely washed empty. It's a mere a shadow of the original tissue. Now the major hurdle here was to get the cells, the viable building blocks, back into the right spots within that organ. That we did through creating literally a pressure gradient across the kidneys. So we were able to suck these cells into the tissue, into the kidneys, into the right spots.
The organs were placed into chambers that simulate the environment of a body, complete with oxygen and nutrients. After a few days of growth, something remarkable happens.
The tissue became functional, so these kidneys started to make a rudimentary urine. In the last step of this experiment, as the ultimate proof of principle, we were then able to take these kidneys from culture and transplant them in an animal model. So we took that final step to take the kidney out of the bioreactor and then treat it like a transplant organ, like a donor organ, and replace the native kidney in an animal with this engineered kidney.
But it's not always that easy.
We had to figure out how much vacuum can be applied to the kidney in order to provide just the right amount of tissue gradient to deliver the cells, but not to damage the matrix. Of course, if more vacuum is applied, we had quite a few kidneys blow up in a jar.
Hiccups aside, laboratory-grown organs appear to be closer and closer to fulfilling their tremendous promise.
The reason why I'm most excited about this recent publication is because it shows the platform character of this technology. The technology can be applied to any tissue, any organ that can be perfused by its own vascular system. Ultimately, this is a very translational kind of research. It's very much focused on driving this all the way down to the bedside, getting this to the patient.
Okay, folks. So, hold on a second here. I'm trying to get the chat window back up. Okay, chat window's back up. So question to you. Coming through the chat window. Okay. What is your reaction to the kidney video? Cool? Gross? Crazy? What do you think about this? What do you think, folks? All three. Okay. All right. If we had more time, I really wish we had more time because I love to do this in class and with everybody together because it's much more enjoyable. If we'd have more time, we'd talk about some of the implications of having this technology. For example, if we had technology that could do this, maybe we could extend the natural life of people by 20 years or more. So rather than dying when you're 80, you die when you're 100. But if you think about it, that has implications because that means you need to feed and support people for another 20 years. So who's going to pay for that, right? There's all sorts of implications for having a technology to grow organs to extend our life. So think about it. If you're curious, do some Googling, reading about tissue engineering. Okay. Do you have any questions right now? Okay, so let me know if you have questions. And what I'm going to do at this point is start talking to you about some of the urinary system anatomy that you need to have basic idea of in order to understand urine formation. You know, we're not going to be experts after today on urine formation, but I think I can get the idea across to you. Okay, so urinary system anatomy. Urinary system anatomy. Number one are the kidneys. Okay, and that's probably honestly the most important of them, right? You have two kidneys, two of them. So we have a backup plan here. Okay, the kidneys do a number of things for us. They filter waste and remove excess material from the bloodstream. You know that. Okay, we've said that before. Okay, by regulating the volume of blood, you regulate the pressure, right? If we have a higher blood volume, that leads to a larger blood pressure. If we have lower blood volume, we have lower blood pressure. So by influencing blood volume, the kidneys regulate blood pressure. The kidneys are involved in regulating blood pH. They influence blood pH, and they do that by selectively removing excess hydrogen ions that might be in the blood. So we know that pH, from our first days in the course, is a scale used to measure the hydrogen ion concentration. If we have more hydrogen ions in the bloodstream, then our blood is more acidic. Well, if we don't want an acidic bloodstream, then we can literally have the kidneys remove some of the excess hydrogen ions in our urine and we can pee them out of the body. Influence blood pH by removing excess hydrogen ions. Okay. The kidneys are also heavily involved in creating the biologically active form of vitamin D, specifically vitamin D3 called calcitriol. So the kidneys manufacture enzymes that make biologically active vitamin D3, known as calcitriol. Okay, we won't go into it any further than that, but I think you already know vitamin D is important for calcium absorption. Without vitamin D, you cannot absorb calcium from the food. Without calcium, we don't have strong bones, our nervous system doesn't work right, our muscles don't work right. So you see that the kidneys, by manufacturing vitamin D, impact the calcium levels, which impacts everything else. I mean, it's extremely important. And then we also have the last thing that I'll mention to you, it is the kidneys that release a special hormone that I think, Terry, you mentioned some days and weeks ago, called erythropoietin. And this hormone is responsible for stimulating the production of red blood cells. Okay. Releases erythropoietin, that's a big word, so it's spelled on the screen for you, which is a hormone to stimulate production of red blood cells. Okay? All right, so kidneys, you know, when you think, oh, well, the kidneys just make pee, it's a lot more complicated than that, folks. They are extremely important to the health of our bodies. Okay, number two, well, the ureters, okay? Most of the anatomy that I'm talking about, actually all of the anatomy I'm talking about right now, you can see on page 319 of your textbook. So I want to encourage you to have that book open, page 319, figure 16.2. The ureters, these are the tubes that transport urine from the kidneys to the urinary bladder. Okay, so in the video that I showed you, the kidneys would be connected to the bladder by these tubes called ureters. In addition to that, we have the urinary bladder, and you know what that is. That is the sac that actually stores the urine until you actually want to expel it from the body. It's a sac that stores urine for future removal from the body. And then we have the urethra. This is the tube that actually transports the urine out of the body, right? When you go to the bathroom, the pee leaves your urethra. Okay, and at least in males, the urethra is also responsible for allowing the semen to exit the body during reproduction. Okay. All right, gang. So I'm going to assume that you're okay unless I hear from you, and I certainly want to hear from you if you're confused, but I have a lot to do, so I'm going to keep rolling here. Please ask questions, interrupt me, type into the chat window. Okay, let's take, so this was urinary system anatomy. Okay, that's getting us started. And the next thing I need to cover with you is kidney structure. Okay, so for kidney structure, I would turn you to, for kidney structure, I would draw your focus to figure 16.3, figure 16.3 on page 319. And there's just a couple pieces here that I want to be sure you've heard me say, and that's in your notes and that you can think about as you read. The first is the renal cortex. Okay, the renal cortex is the outer border of the kidney. The outer border of the kidney. You can see it probably best on picture B of figure 16.3. You see the outer border there is the renal cortex. That word cortex refers to the outer border of anything, right? So you could have an outer border to your heart. You could have an outer border to the liver, and they would all be referred to as the cortex. Okay, next we have the renal medulla. Okay, you can see the renal medulla highlighted on picture C. It's sort of an triangular brown-shaped wedge of content, and I want to describe to you what is in it in just a moment. So it is a triangular section of the kidney, brown in appearance. Okay, and then the renal pelvis. Okay, the renal pelvis, you can see highlighted on picture B. You can see it's kind of pointing to this goldish, yellowish tube area. Okay, so the renal pelvis is actually where the newly formed urine from the kidney first collects, and it's then moved to the bladder. Okay, so this is the collection area for newly formed urine. That's the renal pelvis. Okay, so what I'm doing right now is simply highlighting some of the anatomy that you need to be familiar with so you can understand how excuse me, so you can understand how urine is manufactured. Okay, now I'm also going to highlight something here called the nephron. Okay, the nephron is the functional unit of the kidneys. It is the nephrons, which we're going to talk about in just a moment, which are the machinery that allows urine to be formed by filtering the blood. So the nephrons are the functional units of the kidneys that actually filter blood in order to form urine. And you see, if you look very carefully, that the nephrons have part of their anatomy. If you look at picture C, nephrons have part of their anatomy that are in the renal cortex and part of their anatomy that's in the renal medulla. Okay? Note how the nephrons span, go across the renal cortex and renal medulla. Okay. Question coming through the chat window. Are you with me? Anybody lost at this point? Anybody passed out on their couch? Type in yes if you're passed out on your couch.
Somebody's good. Okay.
Okay. All right. All right. Very good. I hate talking to a computer screen. I really do. I wish we were back together again. Okay. Let's keep going here. The next thing I have to do is talk to you about the structure of the nephron itself. So let's change the page, go to page 320, and we're going to talk about the nephron structure. Okay, so this is nephron structure next, and we're going to use figure 16.4 to highlight a few characteristics of nephron structure. I mean, it's like everything you've learned about in this course. It is never easy. It's worthwhile and it's incredibly fascinating, but it is never easy. So first off, I would turn your attention to figure 16.4 and take a look at the bracket along the upper left corner called the renal corpuscle. Okay, so the nephron is made primarily of two regions called, number one, the renal corpuscle. Okay, this is the area where the blood plasma is filtered. Okay, this is the anatomy of the nephron that's responsible for filtering the blood plasma. Okay. And this renal corpuscle contains some things that I would want to draw your attention to. It contains an area that's called the glomerulus. Okay. The glomerulus is highlighted for you best on figure 16.5. Somebody in the chat window, tell me on page 321, what color is the glomerulus? Page 321, what color is the glomerulus? Okay, it is not yellow. The glomerular capsule is yellow, but the glomerulus is what? Purple. Thank you, Eileen. Okay, that's the glomerulus. The glomerulus is colored purple in figure 16.5. And what you should know about the glomerulus is that the glomerulus is simply a funny name to describe the capillaries that are in the kidneys. Okay, so the glomerulus is the capillaries that are part of the nephron. And remember, the capillaries are blood vessels. Doesn't it make sense that if we're going to form urine from the blood, that we need some anatomy moving blood into the structure of the kidney? Okay, so glomerulus. Okay, the glomerulus is a group of capillaries that's intimately involved in filtering the blood plasma. And then we have the thing that you thought was yellow colored. You got confused there a little bit. That's the glomerular capsule. Okay. Glomerular capsule. Okay. In your book on page 321, the glomerular capsule is colored a golden yellowish color. The glomerular capsule is also called, in other books, it's also called Bowman's capsule, after Dr. Bowman, who first studied it and characterized it. And this is a cup-like structure that surrounds the glomerulus, surrounds the blood vessels, and it collects any water and dissolved solutes that are being removed from the bloodstream. Okay, collects the water and dissolved solutes that are being removed from the bloodstream. Okay, let me know if you have questions, folks. The second piece of the nephron anatomy that I would want you to appreciate is the renal tubule. And you see that as a bracket along the left side of figure 16.4, page 320. The renal tubule. I'm going to say something here that may not make a lot of sense at this moment because we haven't talked about it yet, but the renal tubule is the site of reabsorption and secretion by the nephron. We'll put that into your notes, and it's probably only going to make sense in another 2, 3, 4 minutes. It is the site of reabsorption and secretion by the nephron. Okay, so the renal tubule contains some anatomy that I have to point out. It contains this thing. If you're looking carefully on page 320, do you see the area of the picture that's showing you the proximal convoluted tubule? Okay, we'll tell you what that does in just a moment. But right now, I'm just pointing out the anatomy of the renal tubule. So the renal tubule is made of the proximal convoluted tubule, an area that's called the loop of the nephron, which in other books is also known as the loop of Henle. Okay. And then finally, if you look carefully, we also have the distal convoluted tubule. Okay. All right, gang. So we have basically covered the anatomy that I need you to be at least a little bit familiar with so that you can understand the basic idea behind your information. Any questions? Okay. You know, if you do have kidney trouble, and you go to a kidney specialist, there are even kidney specialists that themselves are specialists. They often call themselves nephrologists. A nephrologist is a kidney specialist which is highly trained in the health and disorders of the nephron and how it functions. Okay, so let's take a look at your information. And I think the best I can do with the time we have is to walk you through some major themes and ideas of this process by using figure 16.7 on page 323. Basic overview of urine formation, figure 16.7, page 323. Okay. Urine formation can be broken down into three major stages, okay? Three major stages, and we're going to talk about each one of them, but I'll list them out. First, we have stage one, which is the glomerular filtration. Stage two, which is the tubular reabsorption. And stage three is the tubular secretion. Okay, these are the three major stages that the kidney performs to end up with the urine that you pee out of your body. Okay, so let's talk about each one of these in turn. First, we have glomerular filtration. Okay, this is going to happen in the renal corpuscle. Okay, glomerular filtration happens in the renal corpuscle. Okay, the rate, and what we mean by this, let me get that spelled correctly for you. What I mean by this, glomerular filtration means that we are filtering blood plasma. We are filtering the water and small solutes out of the bloodstream. Okay, we are filtering water and small solutes out of the blood plasma. Okay, so the water that was in the blood vessel is leaving the blood vessel. Okay, and so the filtration rate, how rapidly we filter blood plasma, is proportional to your blood pressure. The higher your blood pressure, the more rapidly we filter. Okay? The filtration rate is proportional to blood pressure. Okay? Meaning the higher your blood pressure, the faster you filter blood plasma. Okay. All right. So an example of things that are removed during the filtration step. Example of filtered material. It's going to include water, right? So that's your blood volume right there, right? The water of the blood plasma. That's your blood volume. You're gonna remove a lot of that blood volume at this step. In addition to that, any small solutes that are dissolved in there, such as glucose and other sugars, amino acids, some of the nitrogen waste products that are generated by metabolism. Okay, all of these relatively small solutes are removed in the glomerular filtration step. Okay, so it's really kind of hard to get this idea across to students, and so the analogy I typically use is spring cleaning. Think about, I mean, it is springtime, and it might be time to clean your house or your apartment. And so one strategy you might use to clean your living room is to take everything that's small enough for you to carry by yourself and take it out on the front yard for a moment. Okay? Now, anything that you could not carry by yourself, such as your couch or sofa, because it's too heavy, and honestly, it's probably too big to fit through your door without breaking the couch down, well, we'll keep it in the living room, meaning we'll keep it in the blood, meaning we will not filter it. Okay? So do you see on page 323 at red ball number 1 that we have these green arrows? We have these green arrows that are in the glomerular capsule region. Are those green arrows showing material entering the bloodstream or leaving the bloodstream? Please type into the chat window. Okay. On page 323, red ball number 1, cartoon ball number 1, is material at the green arrows entering or leaving the bloodstream? What do you say, folks? Red ball number 1 is material at the green arrows entering or leaving the bloodstream. Is it entering the bloodstream or leaving the bloodstream? Anybody? Okay, thank you very much. Who's on Galaxy A10E? Galaxy A10E, what's your name? Okay, Mary. All right, Mary. Thank you, Mary. You are absolutely right. We are having material leaving the bloodstream, which is the same thing as saying it is filtered out of the blood, all right? So I'm just trying to show you that you can see this for yourself on page 323. Okay. Okay, gang. Any questions? So think of spring cleaning. Remove all the small materials from your living room and put on your front yard. Okay, that's step A, glomerular filtration. Any of the really big furniture will leave in the bloodstream, will leave in the living room because it's too big to get out. Okay. All right. The second step of urine formation is tubular reabsorption. Okay. And during tubular reabsorption, which happens there at red ball number 2, this happens primarily in the proximal convoluted tubule. Happens in the proximal convoluted tubule. Okay. During this step, much of the small material that we put out onto our yard, much of the small material that we filtered out of our living room, much of the small solutes that we filtered out of our bloodstream, we actually end up putting it back. You know, after we've removed it at step 1 onto the yard, we cleaned it up and dusted it, and then we chose that we didn't want to throw it away or sell it, so we put it back into the living room. We put it back into the blood. Okay, and here's some factoids for you. Most of the glomerular filtrate, about 99% of it, about 99% of the material that was removed from the bloodstream at step A is actually put back into the bloodstream. Okay, most of the glomerular filtrate that was removed at step A is put back into the bloodstream. Okay, so you can see that because if you look at the picture on page 323, you notice you have some dark bluish purple arrows that are showing you material that's actually getting put back into the capillaries, back into the bloodstream. Okay. So most of the water that's put back into the bloodstream at this stage is largely the amount of water that we put back is actually controlled by the endocrine system by a specific hormone called antidiuretic hormone. Okay, and if I have time, I'll talk about that in a moment. Okay, so here's our spring cleaning analogy. After dusting the furniture off in the yard to clean it up for the spring, we decide to keep most of it and put it back into the living room. Okay. Now, notice we don't keep everything, right? We return about 99% of it, but that means 1% of that content never gets back into the living room. It stays out, okay? But yes, this whole process that we're talking about, I often talk about students that this process of forming urine is aptly named according to the anatomy because forming urine is a very convoluted process. Okay. All right. Folks, I'm going to keep going to try to get through this content. I hope I don't need you. I don't think I need more than 15 minutes, but if you have to go, you go. I understand. Otherwise, you can pick up with the recording that I'll send to you later because we just have to get through this, okay? So if you're able to stay, that's wonderful. Okay, so step A, we filtered the blood. Step B, we've put 99% back into the blood, but 1% stayed out. That means 1% of material that we didn't think was worth it, 1% of the material that is possibly toxic and dangerous to the body, the kidneys are getting rid of at step B. The third and final step is tubular secretion. Okay. During tubular secretion, during tubular secretion, any excess ions like hydrogen ions and drugs that the body's been metabolizing Well, they're going to be secreted back out of the bloodstream and into the material that's going to form our final urine. So think of this tubular secretion as a final backup step to ensure that we actually remove furniture from our living room that we truly don't want to live with anymore. Okay, so this happens primarily at the distal convoluted tubule. And during this process, an additional filtration is done to remove excess hydrogen ions that would influence the pH and acidity level of the bloodstream, as well as dangerous byproducts of drug metabolism. Okay. All right. So once all of this occurs, we finally have what is urine. We finally have the material that will, in fact, go to the bladder. And in fact, let me trace this out a little bit for you. After, just so you have this pathway, after urine forms in the distal convoluted tubule, well, then it goes into the collecting duct. If you look along the right side of page 323, you can see that that material that's being diagrammed with black arrows on figure 16.7, it goes through the anatomy of the nephron called the collecting duct. After urine forms in the distal convoluted tubules, it travels to the collecting duct. The collecting duct leads to the renal pelvis, which we've defined previously. The renal pelvis enters into the ureter. The ureter enters into the urinary bladder. And then when you choose, you release the urine from your body. Okay? All right. That's about as deep as I'm going to go with you. But if you do take A&P 2, you will get a very deep coverage of your information because it is a topic that we need 2 full lectures on. But hopefully you're getting a general idea of how the blood is filtered. Material is initially taken out, then put back, and then some of the remaining material that we really don't want is again filtered back out. It is a convoluted process. You might ask yourself, why did Mother Nature do it this way? And for that, no one knows the answer. You're going to have to ask Mother Nature why she does it this way, but she does. Okay? So, I have a couple more notes that I want to give you before I turn you loose. Do you have any questions at this time? Okay, I know this is a lot. Let me get these notes into you. That way we can make a fresh, clean start on Wednesday because we got to talk about 2 chapters in a summary fashion on Wednesday. Okay, so the last topic I want to talk about is hormonal influence on kidney function. And so, as with most things, there's more here than I'm going to give you because we just don't have the time. But I would like to give you examples of 2 different hormones that influence urine production in opposite directions. As an example, we have antidiuretic hormone. Okay, that was mentioned earlier in our notes. Antidiuretic hormone is produced in the hypothalamus of your brain. Okay, it's produced in the hypothalamus of the brain and stored for release in the pituitary and the posterior pituitary gland of the brain. Okay, so this hormone is made in the brain and released from a different region of the brain. And its function is to, its purpose is to reduce urine production. To reduce urine production. It's antidiuretic. Okay, so that allows us to have some talking points here, okay? Notice the term diuretic here. I bet you've heard of diuretics before. You might have had family members that are taking water pills to control blood pressure, things like this. Okay, a diuretic is a substance that promotes urine formation. So an antidiuretic will suppress urine formation. Okay, the antidiuretic hormone reduces or suppresses urine formation. Okay, so anti suppresses urine formation. A diuretic is a substance that promotes urine formation. Okay, so within that diuretic category, we have substances that I bet you know about that do promote urine formation. One of them would be alcohol. Okay, alcohol, right? Alcohol makes you pee. Well, it doesn't make you pee, it makes you form urine, and then you feel like you have to go to the bathroom. So alcohol is a diuretic, and it works by inhibiting the secretion of antidiuretic hormone. Okay, alcohol makes you form pee by preventing antidiuretic hormone from being released by the brain. If antidiuretic hormone is released from the brain, it suppresses urine production. So alcohol goes against the effects of antidiuretic hormone. Okay? That makes sense. I hope it does, folks. Okay, so here we have one hormone, antidiuretic hormone, which reduces or suppresses urine production. Okay? The second hormone that I want to give you an example of is atrial natriuretic peptide. I know that's a mouthful. ANP for short. This hormone is manufactured and released by cells in the right atrium of your heart. Okay? It is manufactured and released by cells in the right atrium of your heart. Okay? What atrial natriuretic peptide does is, once it's released from the heart, it travels through the bloodstream to the cells of the kidneys that have receptors to bind to this hormone. Okay, we've kind of talked about that during chapter 10 when we talked about the endocrine system. So this hormone will be released from the heart. It travels to the kidneys where the kidney cells have receptors that bind to it. And when the kidneys attach to the atrial natriuretic peptide, the ANP hormone tells the kidneys to increase urine production. Okay? ANP tells the kidneys to increase urine production. Okay, so you see here in your notes, antidiuretic hormone reduces urine production. Atrial natriuretic peptide increases urine production. So, my final question to you that I'll put in your notes here. Why would the heart want to tell the kidneys to make more urine? If you know the answer to that, please type it into the chat window or unmute your microphone. Why would the heart want to tell the kidneys to make more urine? Does anybody have a possible answer for this? Anybody? Do you think it has anything to do with blood pressure? Okay, I guess you folks are a little tired this afternoon. Let me help you out with this. Okay. Okay, Eileen, to expel toxins by the urine. Okay, thank you for participating. I really do appreciate that. I can't truly say no to that. I mean, maybe the heart is experiencing some toxins that it doesn't like. So that is a small possibility, but that's not typically what scientists think is occurring. Okay, when the heart communicates to the kidneys to make more urine, it's usually because the heart muscle is stretching too much. And it's stretching too much if there's too much blood volume. So if there's too much blood volume for the heart to handle, that means the heart tissue is going to stretch too much. Okay? If the heart's tissue is stretching too much because there's too much blood volume, which leads to an increase in blood pressure, that means the heart muscle tissue is in danger of tearing itself and damaging itself, if not completely blowing the heart out, if you see what I'm saying. Okay, so when blood volume is too high, this causes an increase in blood pressure, which forces the heart to work harder. Okay? If the heart works too hard, the tissue might become damaged. So, the purpose of ANP as released by the heart is to reduce the stress on the heart. Okay? By reducing the blood volume, by creating urine, we lower the blood pressure, which reduces the stress on the heart. Okay, folks, is that making sense?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, folks, thank you for staying with me for another 15 minutes. I would always like to have more time, but I think we'll stop now. And do you have any questions I can help you with at this time? For Wednesday's class, which is our last lecture, we will be covering some of the highlights of chapters 17 and 18. So anything right now that I can help you with?
I personally don't have any questions.
Okay, thank you. All right, so folks, please remember to take your lab exam today, right? I will do my best to get them graded for Wednesday as soon as I possibly can. So please take your lab exam today. And of course, as always, stay safe for yourself and your families. And I will see you on Wednesday. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you, you too.